Okay.
Hi, Kirsten. I want to tell you, first of all, we're very excited that Olson Kundig is coming to Denver, designing the new Kirkland Museum of Fine Arts and Decorative Arts in Denver. We know that they're moving part of the museum, and we know the location. But what do you think is the biggest challenge in designing the new museum? Because we're all very curious.
Well, I think it's like any project. The biggest challenge is really living up to the opportunity that the project brings us. Kirkland is, and I don't know if you've been there and seen their collection, but it's such a rich and kind of unusual collection. They display it salon style. There are a lot of fascinating objects, furniture. So it's a very complex environment, and it's very personal. It's a very intimate space. So as we bring that into a more civic scale building and into the museum district, what we're really trying to do are, enhance the visitor experience and make it something that has an urban relationship to the rest of Denver and to the other museums, but that still maintains that really personal quality that the museum has now. So that's a challenge, but it's a really great opportunity. One of the things we're doing is we're actually moving the entire original Vance Kirkland studio to this new location. So it's actually part of a composition of new and old buildings together on the site, and we think that's going to be pretty interesting.
No, it really does sound interesting, and I think that obviously there's the challenge of kind of doing the new and the old, but also there's a challenge. I think, Denver and Seattle are very similar in lots of ways, demographically and size-wise, but they're different. And now that you've been, you're engaging in a couple of projects in Denver, and that you're getting to know it more intimately, what do you see the differences in, and how will that direct your kind of approach, if in any way? I know this is an urban site, but we still have lots of climate differences and other things that might, prompt you to direct your approach to the project. So I'm just curious about that.
Well, as an aside, I'm from Colorado myself. I was born, mostly raised in Boulder, Colorado, and I went to graduate school at the University of Colorado. So a little bit about what I'm bringing to the team as I'm working with my partner, Jim Olson, is a little bit of local knowledge and a little bit of local experience. And I think you really hit it. In a lot of ways, the cities are similar. And in fact, if you even go back to their origins, where they really became cities in terms of being there for transit and gold rush and things like that, the things that really brought them into being bigger of a center is pretty similar. In a lot of ways, our older architecture, the way we developed around rail lines and things, there are actually a lot of similarities between the two cities. And I think the casual lifestyle, the outlook of people is fairly similar too. But the climate's different. I think there's an attitude about caring about the environment and the importance of the environment to buildings and to our experience, but the climates themselves are pretty different. Fundamentally, the biggest thing we think about as a difference is really the light. Colorado's a very light place, it's sunny, it's bright. And so when it comes to viewing art, that provides challenges. How do you begin to modulate a person's experiences to go from the outside and a clear, bright day into transitional spaces as their eyes begin to prepare to see light at a lower level in an art context and viewing objects. That's one of the things we think about. We think about color differently, how color works on a building, the way the color saturation is different, right? Climate versus very wet climate. And environmentally, again, the thermal changes and things like that are very, they're different in those two areas. But we do actually a lot of work in other, I guess, high desert mountain climates, so we're pretty familiar with all of those differences. But we think about light and the transition between inside and outside a little bit differently.
Right. No, great. Absolutely. The freeze thaw here is the big deal too. It's different in those high desert cities. It sounds like you guys are totally on top of all on that. So great. I also understand that you're just in reading about your bio and everything, and that you're sort of a generalist architect, interiors, architecture, all sorts of things, but urban planning is an area that you have a great interest for. And I'm just curious about, just for inspiration, what's one of your favorite cities to visit, or maybe recent cities that you've found inspiration just from an urban planning standpoint, urban design?
Well, I think as an architect, if you ask any of us, there are obviously great European cities and cities around the world that really are the origins of a lot of what we think about as urban design. Rome obviously sticks out to me. But really fundamentally, I spend most of my time in American cities. I spend a lot of time, traveling for projects or for lectures, and I really never get tired of going to a new place in a country that I haven't seen before. And I think if you go any place, the amount of transition there's been in revitalizing urban cores and downtowns of older and newer cities is incredible in the past 20 years. I mean, Denver looks totally different to me than it did 25 years ago. Seattle looks different than it did to me when I moved here 25 years ago. And I think sometimes that's happening at a really grand scale. You can go to Chicago and see things like Millennium Park, and then you can go to other towns. You can go to Kansas City, or you can go to New Orleans, or you can go to Salt Lake City. But there's always something happening, even at the scale of a walk or a street. People moving back into older parts of town, creating walkable neighborhoods, revitalizing, thinking of how they use retail space differently. And so there's a lot of that's been happening in Seattle. Actually, our offices are in the oldest historic part of Seattle. And in the course of the 25 years I've been here, I've seen it go from nearly abandoned to really vitalized, and in and out of those phases a couple of times. So I think that's what interests me at a planning level. If you look at, and back to this part of Denver, to where the Kirkland is going, you have some great new buildings. You've got a fabric of older buildings. You have surface parking lots. You have residential that's coming back into downtown. So the ability for any project to start to knit those things together, to strengthen, pedestrian connections, the streetscape. Those are the things that really interest me. And I don't think you have to go very far to find them happening.
Oh, great. Well, we're running short on time, and I love hearing that, because I think that I totally agree with you on those standpoints. I know you've done a lot of work in wineries, with wineries, and so it'd be fun to hear, just real quickly, what would be your favorite wine tasting experience has been, in working on those type projects, real quickly.
So they're great projects, wineries, breweries, distilleries. That's been an area that we've enjoyed. I think because it's really where, making and industrial functions of a process come together with visitor experience and using a space. And I think sometimes my favorite wine tasting experiences aren't necessarily architectural, but one that is, and I'll brag about this because it had nothing to do with this, but my partner, Tom Kundig's Mission Hill Winery in Kelowna, British Columbia. That was a project where the owner had this tremendous vision for making an ultimate place for wine. So from the underground cellars to the loggia to the outdoor amphitheaters, it's both a very ambitious project, but it deals a lot with the history of wine and the architecture of winemaking. So every time I've got up there, it's just a really interesting experience, and one that was kind of a once in a lifetime, I think, for the firm.
Great.